little virtual stroll through the historic districts to see what we can see, find what may have slipped between the cracks in our previous investigations. And today this leads us to the Logan's Ferry Powder Works Historic District. Now, this is a little bit later than what I normally look at. These buildings were constructed between 1918 and 1936. The idea was to manufacture bronze powder, an industrial chemical component, the Alcoa. So this area, basically located on 20 acres of land within this long, narrow district next to the Allegheny River and the Pennsylvania Railroad. Rather conveniently located, one would say. The entire site is surrounded by, these are primarily brick masonry, 27 buildings, a couple lightning rods, large water tank, etc., etc. And currently, these buildings are, at least at the time of the publication here, which some time ago, the buildings were vacant or used for storage. There's been like random looting of some of the corrugated material, so they have suffered. The district is significant for its association with the manufacturing of aluminum, specifically aluminum powder, aluminum bronze powder, finely flaked bits of aluminum used in explosives, fireworks, paints, inks, and things of this nature. Alcoa, which is the aluminum company of America, began as the Pittsburgh Reduction Company. Charles Martin Hall, one of the founders, carried on a bunch of experiments here to develop methods of producing powder by stamping. This was about 1908, and the production took place here in what they were calling the New Kensington Works. The average monthly production of 26,000 pounds of powder. And on November 5th, 1917, a large explosion destroyed the powder manufacturing department. 23 employees injured and 8 died. So as a result of this, they searched for a new location away from the main manufacturing complex in New Kensington, and thus you have this area of Logan's Ferry, which was to serve as the new aluminum powder plant location. 7 years later, a plant explosion again occurred. They expanded over these years, and July 18th, 1929, a second explosion occurred. And oddly enough, just like the first one, we're told 23 employees were injured and 8 died from the explosion or from severe burns. Very odd coincidence, I'll say. So there's a book called The Metallurgy of Aluminum and Aluminum Alloys, which describes this process. And usually the raw material that was used was scrap aluminum foil, light gauge sheet. They soften it, they heat it, they stamp it, break it into flakes, and grate it. In order to prevent the flakes from sticking together, they use a lubricant like an oil, a wax, an acid, or a soap, like a fatty acid or a soap. And they sieved it and made different grades of this stuff. Much of this for paint. Among the uses of this was coating of balloon and dirigible gas bags, which I find a little bit interesting, as well as, painting oil storage tanks, gas holders, and other things which need to be kept cool, because aluminum powder, aluminum paint, when it's bright and highly reflective, this is when it's generally used for. In polishing, they had to rub each surface of the fine flakes of powder without disintegrating them, so they would stir it with paddles, or use a brush machine where these stiff bristle brushes were revolved against the surface of a cylinder which contained the powder. They would degrease it sometimes and add coloring to it, and they would make resins, lacquers, or using polished steel balls to sort of rotate inside these mills and pound it into flakes. By 1940s, they were using this stuff to make metallized paper, printing inks, fireworks, stuff like that. And primarily, and during the Vietnam War, military explosives accounted for 150,000 tons. So through the 70s, the danger of explosion still remained. In 79, one of the 2 furnaces exploded, killed a guy, and they suspended the manufacture permanently at this plant. Eventually it was sold, and all the equipment was removed, and all the jobs of the employees were terminated, closed in the 80s.
So much for the old powder works. Unless that's part of it over there, but I don't know. The listing said Barking Road, and this here is Barking Road. Not much left to see, is there? So much for protecting our cultural heritage. And yeah. But there she is. What's left of the old gal? Not much to write home about anymore. Kind of funny how they just stop it right here. No street view available, eh? Well, we'll just see about that. What is this, boats hanging out after work? What are you guys doing, huh? You guys got story to tell? I'll bet you do.
Next up, the Alpha Terrace. This is a 25 brick row houses with stone facades arranged on either side of Beatty Street in 2 facing rows, 13 on one side, 2-story Queen Anne's, and 12 3 stories of combined Richardsonian Romanesque and Queen Anne on the other side. Highly irregular, both of these rows, but together combining to form a unified whole, rich in form and detail, much like America. Despite the loss of a cone roof here and there, built as speculative housing, we're told, between 1889 and 1894. This is one of the Pittsburgh's best multi-unit examples of flamboyant Victorian-era row housing. Built on land once owned by the prominent Weinbittle and Negley families, was part of S.J. Sargent's plan. Believed to have been constructed in 1889, it remained rental property under single ownership until the 50s when the units were individually sold, and today there's both owner-occupied and rental units. And although built in 2 primary stages, we're told Alpha Terrace is clearly the result of a single moving force. Architecturally unified and differentiated from its immediate neighbors, this planned development, an unconfirmed source suggests that Alpha Terrace was originally a private enclave with low walls and gates controlling access at either end. One startling aspect of the design is the way in which 3-dimensional forms are repeatedly employed. Each narrow facade, though clearly of superficial depth, assumes the guise. Freestanding picturesque Victorian house typifies early development in the Highland Park district to the north. Built at the edge of this desirable turn-of-the-century residential area, we're told Alpha Terrace exploited the economic advantages of row house development while sacrificing none of the favored picturesque qualities of its time and place. As a totality, it's dense and urban. It's spacious and suburban. This is a unique product of Victorian-era Pittsburgh because of the long unified rows which characterize row house development in Philadelphia and Baltimore. However, they're very rare here in Pittsburgh. Large freestanding houses were the order of the day, as Pittsburgh's East End was developed in the late 19th and early 20th.
The reason why I even do these, I'll take this little lull in the tale to clarify. It's not that I find everything suspicious in these neighborhoods. In fact, sometimes these stories make sense, and I think it's good to temper speculation and the more glaringly obvious, blatant lies of history with stories that are reasonable and areas that are reasonable. It's just interesting to see when they lump these large districts into one listing. It's interesting to see what kind of slips through the cracks. A lot of times we're shown a real one house and we're told some story about it. It's supposed to exemplify the whole region. And oftentimes I find that to be not the case. So district by district, we're going to make our way through this great country. And we're going to see things that make sense and things that don't make sense. And why it might be a little less impressive or less mind-bendy, I think it's important. I think it's important to tell all the stories and then sift through them as we would. Every lie has a solid, hefty dose of truth in there. That's what makes it such a good lie, if it is indeed a good lie. I mean, I guess you could call a bad lie, like, I have 5 heads. But saying you have 1 head, but you used to have 2, that's much more believable. And that'd be half true, wouldn't it? It's a terrible example, but you know what I'm saying.
The Robesonia Furnace Historic District. That's right. The first furnace on the site here of Robesonia was established in 1794, and the iron industry persisted there into the 20th century. An iron plantation itself, no other iron-making community in Pennsylvania incorporates the variety, integrity, and sophistication of the architectural resources of Robesonia, containing several buildings of architectural note, including the Second Empire Taylor Mansion and the Ironmaster's Mansion, which is odd for a company town. Unusually sophisticated millwork and detailing, we're told, and although much of the industrial components were demolished in 1927, you can still see foundations and retaining walls, and had the potential for yielding information about the site by suggesting the size and configuration of lost buildings as well as the overall layout. Artifacts such as pigs and ladles are scattered around, and they may be a source of information about equipment used and things like this. Robesonia Furnace began with the establishment of Reading Furnace at the same location in 1794 by the gentleman named George, who also owned nearby Charming Forge. Ore for the furnace came from the Cornwall mines about 25 miles away in Lebanon County. In 1807, he built a Georgia mansion for himself near the furnace and some log and stone tenant houses. And after his death in 1829, the property was run by a trustee, sold it in 1836, and this was about 7,000 acres of land. And there was ore, and the rights to ore from the Cornwall mines, as well as the mansion, a grist mill, a sawmill, a bunch of other buildings. Now, in 1845, the furnace was sold to Henry P. Robeson, who came from the Manda Gap Furnace in Dauphin County. No relation, hopefully, to the local hussy and unfaithful gold digger Linda Robeson of local lore. This Robeson replaced the charcoal furnace with an anthracite furnace with a hot blast, capable of producing 50 tons of iron a week. They built a new stack, yielding 240 tons of iron a week, and in 1855, when the Lebanon Valley Railroad was completed, through what was to become Robesonia, this obviously greatly facilitated shipment of both raw materials and finished products, and in 1876, George Taylor becomes superintendent of the furnace. They abandoned one stack, enlarged a second stack, and they decided to only manufacture one kind of pig iron, named Robesonia, or Robesonia, I don't know, made exclusive of Cornwall ore. W.C. Freeman of Lebanon became president of the company. However, George Taylor remained as superintendent until his death in 1903. In 1912, having accumulated a mountain of slag, the company used it to make cinder block, and they used this cinder block to build a number of buildings, including a firehouse, tented houses, a chemical laboratory, and these houses are still standing. And 1924, they went electric, but the increased productivity and efficiency of the furnace eventually led to its demise, because when the furnace was established, it owned the rights to free ore from the Cornwall ore banks, 15 miles southwest, for 130 years. So this is about 2,000 tons a year. And then with modern production, this increased to 100,000 tons per year taken for the mine. And although the original agreement only entitled them to ore for one furnace, by maintaining two furnaces, one to be at the ready when the other was out of blast, the company ate up tremendous amounts of ore, which led to legal battles, and the court established their right to supply one furnace, but wouldn't allow them to utilize the other furnace when the primary furnace was not in service. So when Bethlehem Steel acquired the mines, they decided that to stem the drain on the mines, their only choice was to buy and dismantle Robesonia furnace, which they proceeded to do in 1927. And so the furnace complex was dismantled and the homes were sold off individually, and now the furnace town is a residential neighborhood, and the original mansion is now owned by a rehab center. The town of Bloody Run, well, was located along the original Forbes Road, which was constructed in 1758, the main east-west corridor from Philadelphia to Fort Pitt. This trail ran from Maryland to Huntington, Pennsylvania, essentially following the Raystown branch of the river, and presently turned into Route 26. Originally, there was an Indian settlement that once existed on the site of the town, so Bloody Run was laid out in 1795 by Michael Barndollar, a man from Germany, not a very German name, but later from Frederick County, Maryland. He purchased 400 acres, which included a creek named Bloody Run, on March 7th, 1787. The early town was named Waynesburg in honor of George Wayne. However, the post office bore the title of Bloody Run. The name of the creek has no definite origin, though several legends do exist. The town held the name Waynesburg until 1860, officially changed to Bloody Run to match the post office. And then in 1873, a court decree renamed the town Everett after the statesman and orator Edward Everett. He was the one-time governor of Massachusetts, president of Harvard University, and he was best known as the speaker opposite Abraham Lincoln, the reading of the Gettysburg Address. Imagine that. How do you follow up the Gettysburg Address? I have something to say against that. A biography of George Washington was also written by Mr. Everett, who also initiated the efforts to save and preserve Washington's home, Mount Vernon. 80 acres west of Bloody Run were purchased from Michael Barndollar by Samuel Tate of Shippensburg at the turn of the 19th century, and there were a few early settlers, amongst them William Paxton and Robert Culbertson, who operated a hotel. Culbertson himself rode a post route also to Shippensburg, 60 miles away. Michael Barndollar had constructed a stone building in 1802 where he lived and operated a store, and this building was the site of the present Union Hotel. The first post office was opened in 1806. And after Samuel Tate's death, his land was divided and sold, and then this enabled further settlement. There was a turnpike, Pittsburgh, Bedford, and Chambersburg Turnpike, completed in 1819. The opening of this road was significant for the growth of young Waynesburg. There were 3 toll gates, and tolls were collected, and no toll gates survived, thankfully. The growth through transportation services, well, as recorded in 1832 by Joseph Strong, who was a stagecoach driver from Cumberland, Maryland, there were 18 buildings in the main area of town and 5 hotels. Bloody Run Hotel, Stage House, Old Horseshoe Bend House, which later became the Red Tavern, Old Mansion House, and Yellow House. Small foundry was here, operated until it burned in 1864. The foundry was rebuilt by Frederick Felton in brick, of course, 1874. And there's a Methodist church, which erected in 1812. There's another one, 1859. There was a Presbyterian church on Hill Street, which has been demolished. And there's a Zion Lutheran and Grace Brethren churches, which still stand, at least at the time of this writing, the same block of West Main Street. 1863, as happened time and time again, the construction of a railroad heralded in an era of industrial development. Bloody Run, passenger and freight stations from this era stood on West 3rd Street. They've moved and been renovated, and the population grew by 200 within 2 years of the arrival of the railroad. This railroad ran for 91 years, and many 5-bay vernacular brick houses were built during this, lining Main Street. These houses bear the evidence of a single builder due to their similarities. There was a tannery, which employed about 100 men year-round and operated until it burned in 1908. And the lumber industry continues to be a healthy force in the region. Steam sawmill brought here to Bedford County by J.J. Barndollar. Planing mill was built by J.M. Bender, and none of these industries survive today. There was a small cigar manufacturing business at one point, and a carriage and wagon making business, and there was a cemetery chartered just east of the district in 1878. Now, eventually, there was an extension of the railroad southward into the iron ore mines, which led to the construction of a blast furnace here. The nation's economy stalled the actual production of steel until 1889, and it was first fired in 1890 and operated until the inferior quality of the local iron ore was overcome by ore from other areas and was shut down in 1923. And then, due to the Great Depression and poor management, it went bankrupt in 33. The bank was founded in 1885, as well as the Everett Glass Company, which went on until 1902. The town was electrified in 1894 with the installation of 40 street lamps. That same year saw the first printing of the Everett Republican. In 1898, the old Union Hotel was demolished and replaced with the present building, of course. And though currently unused, it remains the largest travel accommodation for the 19th century within the district, at least at the time of this writing. There was a plan to extend the railroad, which was abandoned in the 30s, and when the Lincoln Highway was designated in 1913, following the original Pennsylvania Road, Everett was able to serve travelers same way as it had since the early 19th century. Garages, restaurants, hotels, accommodating Lincoln Highway motorists essentially. And the turnpike, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, was built in the late 1930s on the path of the railroad, which essentially bypassed Everett as a traveler stop, offering no direct access to the highway. And there were interchanges 8 miles east at Breezewood, which is known as the town of motels, and also 8 miles west at Bedford. And so Everett kind of got cut out of the equation. There was a geographic change when the Raystown branch of the river was straightened and a flood control dike was built along the north bank in 1968. And then at some point, they opened a 4-lane bypass of the town by Route 30 in 1980, which eliminated a lot of the motorist traffic, which would otherwise have passed through the town. So, big picture, the town of Everett, well situated to provide amenities for trade and accommodation for the traveler on the historic Lincoln Highway. There's also the farmers and residents of the rural region. There's a lot of mercantile activity. And traditional businesses which cater to the agricultural livelihood still exist. Many of them are housed in these historic buildings today.
Let's see what she looks like today, shall we? Completely different from the surrounding areas, aren't they? Look at those little pinnacles. How beautiful. I imagine these have been kept up very well. Good golly wackles. Looks like a slice at a time. What a beauty. And always with the weird mysteries, the bricked up windows and such, and the strange foundations. And look at that. Just look at that. A pumpkin for every step. How very thoughtful. But really, what a striking street. Unbelievable. Hard to believe these stories that these just, the builder just decided to just do something different. Just a little odd, just one street in this whole area just decided to go all balls out Queen Anne. I don't know. Something tells me there's a different story here. You would. Pennsylvania. Thank God at least the majority of you have sense. What about you, Bones? Who'd you vote for? Yeah. Well, if you're dead, I think I know. Just like your neighbor. I knew it. All the dead people vote that way. And some of the living, too. What a cool street. Well, these houses are very close to each other, but still. The exterior is just something out of another world. Look at that. How cool. What a lovely place, and I'm glad to see it's untouched by time, unlike the old Logan's Ferry powder works. And then it's like just abruptly comes to a stop. Beep. And now we're back here in no man's land, where things can get back to normal. God, what's wrong with you weirdos? Really? I'm shocked. Where I live, that's 3 times more signs than I've ever seen. Which should tell you something about this part of the country. Why you're so fucky. What's going on there, bro? You doing all right, dude? Snap out of it, Louie. Let's see what old Everett looks like today. Ah, yes, the old dirt road primitives. Well, there's a good place to start as any. And really, all we're doing here, as you've already seen what the pictures look like, is seeing if it retained any of its old world charm. Seeing how much of it's been placed over the years. There's a clear shot of the theater. Happy 90th indeed, good sir. And yes, it does. It looks very charming. Look at these big tuna cans on the street. Old dirt road primitives? What? It's a coincidence, I swear. I wonder what this looked like at one point, and why even keep it if there's no bell or anything attached? It just seems very odd. A relic from a time long gone. Amazing how the photography just switches like it. Let's go have a look at this old boy. A four-pronged tower. I might have known. Oh, that makes sense, sure. I'm glad that the area still looks pretty much untouched in many ways. You know, you don't see that sometimes. But she looks right purty. Excuse you. The bleep do you think you are, bro? It's that weird-shaped pond. That's the one I was trying to see, with that beautiful steeple. And why? How does this make sense? Really? Like, how in the world does this make sense? These windows, like, why would you do this with these windows sizes shrinking? Just seems ridiculous. The story behind them just seems ridiculous. You're entering this door a full story higher than this one. Just seems odd. I don't know what the construction tale is about this one, but I'm sure that they leave that bit out and act like there's nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see at all. Well, I'll be jiggered. What a beautiful, beautiful area. Pennsylvania has such dark, strange energy, which is a shame because the buildings are beautiful. And the land. Can't forget you guys. Hey, trees. Look at that gorgeous old world banger. And the striking blue of these recycled cans, it just really brings out the color on this roof. And this one will guaranteed not burn should the area be subject to completely random and natural forest fires that conveniently skip the forest and just target homes, as forest fires do. That's what I've learned. And we'll just take a real quick look down here at the Robesonia furnace area. And the thing about this story that I found to be rather odd was on Freeman Street, was the nature of the housing that they said. Not so much some of these are added much later. Not so much the workmen's houses, but the mansion, the Taylor mansion that the boss man built for himself. And I'm not sure if it's still standing. That looks like it could be one of the old workmen's houses. Is this it down here? Welcome to Robesonia. No. Yes. Well, some of these definitely look like mansions. Let's take a gander, shall we? Oh. Can't see the mansion for the trees, isn't that what they say? That's too bad. Well, really, I don't even know if I'm in the right place. Some of these historic districts, wow, look at that banger, are just a little vague. I mean, people gotta have the privacies, they gotta have the privacies. And this is now turned into a residential district, so I can understand if it's hard to navigate the area. Still, though, what a beautiful neighborhood. It's hard for me to tell if this is a rich neighborhood or if this is just what upper middle class Pennsylvania looks like. Guess it could be a bit of both. Yeah, that's not suspicious. I can tell you right now, this one's one of the original oldies. You don't even have to tell me if I'm right or wrong. I already know I'm right. I'm so right, dude. I'm the rightest.